You're listening to Legacy Lawyers, hosted by Michael Haslam and Nathan Croxford.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Legacy Lawyer podcast. I'm your host, Mike Haslam, and I'm joined with Taylor Stone today. How's it going, Taylor?
Doing all right, Mike, other than this phenomenal sounding voice.
Working through a cold, sounding very
Yeah, it sounds like
not yourself.
It sounds like I should do trailers for movies or something like
Yes.
that. So if we get more hits on this podcast, then by all means, I guess I'll try and be sick more. I'm not sure what that actually means.
Should have had you welcome everyone to the podcast.
There you go. Welcome to Legacy Leader.
Well, today's episode is going to be about Section 8 housing, which is a little different than what we talk about a lot of times, but this has a great overlay with special needs trust. We see this a lot when people who are on government assistance inherit money, and they're worried about how that inheritance is going to impact their benefits they're on. They might be on Medicaid, they might be getting Social Security income, they might be on Section 8 housing or HUD housing, subsidized housing, all those terms, basically the same program. So this is going to be an interesting episode because there's really not a lot of good information out there on this topic.
Right. I'm completely with you there, Mike. And we've seen this a lot from individuals who are kind of, like you were just explaining, individuals who are all of a sudden receiving an inheritance. And always it's kind of in a crisis situation, right? That they're like, oh no, I spent 2 years trying to get onto the voucher program under Section 8. And now all of a sudden I'm going to receive maybe $10,000 from my uncle that I never knew. And how is that going to affect my housing? All of a sudden, am I going to have to get off the program to be able to pay for it with those funds, and then wait another 2 years to get back on? That makes no sense.
And it makes it even more complicated because in 2024, well, this is just, a small comment on how fast our government works sometimes. In 2016, the act or the law that governs subsidized housing was updated, but the final regulation did not come out until the end of 2024 and went into effect January 1st of 2025. So about a year ago, all updated rules finally came from this statute that was 10 years ago.
So isn't that crazy too that it was, and also you have to think, it started with that presidency at the very beginning of that in 2016, rolling up almost until he got back in.
It's true.
We had a whole administration in the middle of this trying to become actually get to the final regulation.
That is really interesting. It's kind of, there may be some politics because this is slower than I've almost seen any final reg. The IRS has done some slower, but
sure.
Maybe there might have been a little politics on why it didn't get done.
Yeah.
But
excessive feet dragging, something like that. But regardless,
we'll leave it. We'll let people kind of make their own conclusions there, I guess.
Right. Feel free to leave your conclusions in the comments.
Why did it take 10 years to get a final regulation?
Yeah, right.
I think it just got sent to the wrong email. Never.
Right.
Never got.
Then COVID,
That guy left. He hasn't invented the...
Yeah, right. Anyway, so this new one has come out then in 2024 with just some kind of adjustments and things like that. And there have been kind of through time, the government really trying to kind of crack this interesting egg here, if you want to use the analogy. And that is trying to be able to provide some kind of help to more indigent populations, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's now what they've been kind of able to do just that. And the nice thing about this one is that, although I'm sure steep with politics throughout, as we always know, this one at least follows kind of a pretty logical track to get us to where we are, which is a lot of flexibility, kind of this subsidy that comes from the government in the form of a voucher that can allow people to be to be in a lot of homes of their choosing to be able to rent, and then they have kind of this little voucher that they that covers a certain amount of what they're paying in their rent, and then they just pay the balance, right? And so they can live in kind of these, they don't have to live in like a Section 8 groups of homes or that kind of a thing. No, it's regular neighborhoods, and people do use this in that very same way. I mean, I think that of a lot of the policies that we have personally, I think that this one really does allow for some benefits for a lot of people to kind of have a little bit of normalcy in a really bad situation.
And like it's really kind of tricky because it takes such a long time to get on this program.
Yeah.
Like the waiting period for a lot of these homes and communities can be years. And so once
Right.
you're on, like the fear or the concern of if I get kicked off, what am I going to do for housing for the next 2 years to get back on? And then there's also like we've seen since after just the COVID era, like rents double in a lot of communities and cities.
Yeah.
So I think the demand for this program has gone up, and like people who are on it really won't have anywhere to go if they lose their benefits. So understanding the rules are, I think, more important than ever for people who you need this program.
Yeah, for sure. And before we dive into some of those rules, I think it's really important to kind of put on a little bit of our disclaimer there, Mike.
Yes, you want to disclaim?
All right, let's see if I can get this disclaimer. Michael and I both we are practicing attorneys. However, we are not your attorneys. Anything in this podcast will not and cannot be construed as legal advice for you in your specific situation. If you're suffering from any of the effects of Section 8 housing or inheritance, any of those things, by all means, contact a local attorney. You can come in and you can be our clients, but you are not at this point. This is for educational purposes and entertainment.
Perfect. Nailed it. So with that out of the way, where do you want to start? Should we just go over what the rules are now? And if you Google like Section 8 housing, like you're going to find a lot of old articles with the old rules. So you really can't rely on the internet for this. AI will also steer you wrong. I tested it. It doesn't know the new rules. So you really need to talk to an attorney and read the actual statutes and go to the source material. So
For sure.
that
And especially kind of in an environment where we're at, where a lot of things, although they can change more quickly, although this one, they've been a little bit long in changing. By all means, making sure that you're just as up to date as possible. This is one of the first times that I'm actually thinking about this in the context of, hey, if you're listening to this in around February 2026, this is about what we were able to find. If things have changed in a month, we're sorry for that. We'll make an update.
yeah.
So some of the things when it comes to eligibility, there's really, and we're talking about eligibility for people to get onto this program. There's kind of three big main things that people have to get over. One is their particular income status, meaning their median income that they're receiving for their particular area, which is, again, different depending on the counties that you're living in, right? Mike and I were both actually in separate counties at present, and we have very different incomes, I'm sure area median incomes for our particular counties, right? And so being able to be aware of that and find out where you land in there, that's the first one. Another one is asset restrictions. And you can't think that all asset restrictions are the same. We talk about a lot of programs here for sure, between Medicaid and Social Security and some of these others. The asset restriction for Section 8 housing is really specific as well. And they go off of what's called a net family asset, or net family assets, which is about $100,000. And then the last one, of course, is your background. Whether you have drug addiction, or whether you have drug convictions, violent offenses, any of these others, those can also be limiting factors on your application, your eligibility. But of course, we're really going to focus on kind of those first two, the income and the assets, when we're talking about eligibility for some of our clients who we've talked to when they come in.
So the income limit's going to be specific by the area, and then I think the biggest change from the old rules to the new is the new asset limit.
Yeah, and how's that adjustment there, Mike, between kind of how it was and how it is now?
Yeah, so before we didn't have asset requirement, and that's where some of the old material will talk about how the program's 100% income based, and now they've clarified that they look at net family assets
Hmm.
and they exclude certain things, like if you have a 401k or IRA, that's not counted as an asset, but
Hmm.
they will include your savings account and you
Yeah.
know, a traditional brokerage account, and the threshold is $100,000, and the regulation does earmark it for adjustments for inflation, is what I saw.
Hmm.
So
Right.
that number will change a little bit each year. But it's based on the consumer price index, and so each year it can go up a little bit. But yeah, 100,000 is kind of the since this just went into effect. I haven't looked and I haven't seen if they adjusted 2026s yet, but it was 100,000 last year because that was the first year it went into effect.
Right. And that was the one that I was kind of I was following was just the the 100,000 at least for this year. And especially, I thought it was always kind of interesting that they referred to it as kind of the net family assets, right? And um, that they look at the fact that it's for individuals who are there in that home. And let me actually find it so we can actually look off of specifically Florida. It's all assets owned by specifically the family. This includes then I know that there was a piece in here about children who I think they had to be over the age of 18, that they would start to kind of count their assets as well. Because again, we're talking about everybody who would be located in that home, who would be able to fall under there as far as that family. I apologize, Mike. Let me try and find it for us.
So while you're looking for that, I'm just going to make a comment to you,
Please.
like each the where the Section 8 program or subsidized housing programs, there are a couple different types of programs within it.
Sure.
So when someone comes to us and they say, "Hey, am I going to be qualified?" We always have to get some documentation or confirmation of exactly what program they're on. And then we can go and look at the underlying regulations and confirm the requirements. So for example, in the rules, there's two programs that this asset limit doesn't apply to. So if someone's on those two programs, then the recommendation would be totally different. Now, most people are on the Section 8 program, which would care, but some are on the other programs. So you really have to always look at your specific rule, your specific program, look at the specific rules for that program. And then this area law is even a little more confusing because each local area has a public housing authority
Yeah.
who who administers the program, and they have some discretion. So I had a client 4 or 5 years ago inherit a bunch of money,
Yeah.
and they were in subsidized housing. And so we looked at the program they were on, we looked at what the rules allowed us to do, and we executed a plan that would allow them to preserve the assets as much as possible and get the help they need. But under the rules, they should have they it should have increased what they had to pay on their monthly rent. They weren't
Hmm.
going to get kicked off of the program. They weren't going to get kicked out, but they should have increased how much rent they have to pay. But once we did all the planning and we sent over the special needs trust we created and everything to the Public Housing Authority,
Hmm.
um, they just kind of look they just kind of filed it away and didn't end up changing the rent. They just said, okay. So like my client was happy because I set this expectation, hey, we're gonna have to pay more under the rules, and then they just didn't follow
Yeah.
the rules. And um, that
Yeah.
oversight. So it's always a little interesting in this because people will be like, oh well, that happened to so and so and it didn't cause a problem with their housing. And it's like
Yeah.
it might not have that time, but under the rules, it should. Do you want to go find out? And then if you get kicked
Yeah.
off, so you kind of got to plan as if they are going to follow the rules, and then if they don't, cool, you can just keep, moving along.
Right. Well, and I think that's also a great point to at least explain kind of the structure for all of this, because this, like so many of these other programs, Section 8 is a federal program, right? That's then administered kind of at our state level, which sounds a lot like Medicaid, right?
Hmm.
Federal program administered at state level, but even more so is that this program is administered at like the county level and even sometimes the city level. And so because of that, and like you also hit on the head, now that we're at that low of a level, we have really kind of this buy-in from that public housing authority to say, hey, I want to make this determination for this particular case and maybe not for the next case or something like that. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of kind of wiggle room for them to do that kind of between the administrators. Whether or not that's right, who knows? I actually think that it's better at that lower level. I'm kind of a local government guy, so I kind of like a lot of these things better. It's more that you can affect and all that, and because I feel like there's a lot more of that buy-in for trying to find solutions to problems. That's kind of why I really enjoy this. I really do like the idea of this program and the way that I've seen it implemented in a lot of ways. Is just because there's a lot of that kind of, well, I guess in your instance, we're not going to raise the rent. But can you use that as a rule, like you said? No, because here's what the rule is. And we have to plan that everything will be right. We can't just go off the fact that, it worked for so-and-so, so it's not going to be a problem.
Yeah, it's kind of so I got us off on a tangent, but
Oh, no
yeah,
worries.
like it's administered inconsistently on purpose, kind of, or I don't know if that was the design, but that's just the reality. It's administered on a case by case. And the one thing I would tell everyone too to keep in mind is it, a lot of times the staff's, well, it depends on the location, but sometimes the staff isn't super huge. So if the person that's assigned and that's doing your recertification each year, reexamination is technically what they call it, changes, they might have been fine with the non-compliance, the old guy, but the new guy might be like, "Oh, you're
Yeah,
not compliant." So I just recommend everyone like get dialed in on the rules, set up to follow the rules,
right.
and and then you just kind of have extra peace of mind.
Exactly. Just ensure you're being taken care of in the right way. Ensure you're just following it. And if you find out somebody's like, well, I didn't have to do all that extra work, great. Hopefully that continues on for them and God bless and on their way. But we'll make sure, and that's something that I do enjoy about what we're trying to do for our clients is just trying to make sure that they're as up to date as possible, whatever the regulation is about how things are kind of going together. Now, as well, something that I was able to find. This is it was what is defined as the family. Of course, it's it's a head of household and the spouse, right? But it's also each member of the family who's also over the age of 18 years old. I know that the 18-year-old piece was also included some other places too when you were talking about income. The annual income also, they look at annual income not just for the head of the household, but also everybody above the age of 18, right? So that's what's also included in there. So, oh, well, I might not have a great income, but including, my son who also works at Subway, that might change things for us,
Or my
right? And
sister
that might,
moved in.
right, exactly. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, and I'm, I'm lineally below these two parents who are kind of the nuclear family kind of a thing.
Okay, so we have an asset rule, we have income rules, and
Right.
so let's talk about the scenario we help the most.
Yeah.
Somebody is already on the program and they receive assets they weren't planning on.
Yeah.
Um, are they just stuck? They're going to get kicked off the program, or do we have a little bit of flexibility on how we plan for that?
Well, it really kind of depends, Mike, because I think that we've already hit kind of the big major hurdles that we're already talking about that they're having to get across. Oftentimes, we'll have clients that say, "Hey, I'm just getting an inheritance. So and so passed away. That uncle of mine that I didn't really know, and now I'm receiving $10,000." Well, if we're looking at my total assets, and if my total net family assets are less than $100,000, and that $10,000 that might not move the needle much, right? That $10,000 might not do anything,
Yeah.
and therefore might just be able to stay on the program and no issue, right? Everything just kind
Yeah.
of rolls forward for me. How about if I start to receive? Well, so that's on the asset side. Now, if the inheritance that I receive, from that uncle I got, maybe he lived out in Duchesne County, and or Uinta County, and they have some mineral rights that are all of a sudden starting to pay out, right? Well, now that instead of an asset, that's actually more that would be more of like income, right? So it's something that generates,
Well, it
over
could be a
annual.
double whammy, right? They could say, hey,
Yeah.
the value of the mineral rights went up because the income went up.
There you go. Yeah, exactly, right? And then because that income that's coming in, now that might change the way that the amount of rent that I have to pay. Not necessarily going to kick me off the program, but again, it might just change that amount.
Yeah.
So what about a circumstance then, Mike, that somebody comes in and they're like, "Hey, I'm getting a house. What am I supposed to do? It's probably likely over $100,000. So what am I supposed to do in that circumstance?"
Yeah. So they do have some cool rules, like about if the house isn't going to be functional for you, it can be not counted as an asset.
Yeah, yeah, right. Or they also have that other rule in there too that if, say that maybe I'm not going to receive it just myself, but me and like my three other siblings, and they're not on Section 8 housing, but I am, right? And they usually won't count that asset either because it's likelihood that you're going to end up selling that and those kinds of things. In which case, that $100,000, maybe that's my share, or maybe I might receive a portion. Oh, then it would come over, and then that would kind of affect the assets that I have, that kind of a thing.
Yeah. So but if it is a house that'd be suitable, right? Like, and it is yours, you probably move into it and not worry about
Yeah.
subsidized housing anymore. So that's kind of the idea behind it, which is good.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I think we all kind of think too. I mean, it's pretty practical to be able to say, "Oh, well, you got a house now, so yeah, the program's not going to probably allow you to receive a stipend or receive a voucher for a home that you already own. So here you are," that kind of a thing.
Now, if let's say it was cash, right? You had 100,000 of cash and you are over and you gave it away to somebody or you moved it into like an irrevocable trust or special needs trust. This is, I
Yeah.
think, where it's a big change in the rule. Um, Before, um, since there was an asset problem, we
Mhm.
could do some of this and it gave us more flexibility. But under the new rule, we have a 2-year waiting period on that transfer, essentially.
Yeah. So meaning that I've received this, let's call it $150,000. I receive it from that uncle. Oh no, now what am I supposed to do? Well, now I have assets more than the $100,000 easily, right? And so now I don't qualify. So, but what does that mean practically? Well, if now we're talking about like we're not in the 1930s style old public housing. We're not in this big building that we're now living under the actual public house. No, we're actually just having our rent subsidized by the government. Okay, well, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm kicked out of the house. Just tell the landlord, hey, for the next 2 years, I'm paying this rent out of pocket, right? Maybe it was moved into an irrevocable trust or something like that, and maybe I'm just paying for it now. So you're just not receiving that subsidy. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get kicked out, but you're able to pay, and maybe you can work with that as well with that maybe public housing authority on how you're supposed to manage that from that owner, the one who owns the home.
Well, and so this is where the planning on this will change a little bit with the new rules, right? Like the easy thing might have been and put it in a special needs trust because here's the thing, like you got to understand, like most people who need and qualify for Section 8 housing also might qualify for Medicaid, and they also might qualify for Social Security income. So you
Right.
might be on multiple programs. So that
Wait, we don't
inheritance,
all have the same things, Mike? Not the
yeah,
same eligibility and qualifications?
they're not. Yeah, it'd be so. Let's just make it confusing as we can.
Right.
So if you inherited the money and you're on all three programs, whoever's helping you has to be able to assess each program individually and then come up with a plan of is there a way to keep you on all three programs?
Yeah.
If not, okay, what programs do we care the most about? And then you go from there in your planning.
Right. Man, I think that you just made a lot of personal representatives out there who are thinking, about to take on this really Herculean task of managing an estate, all of a sudden they're like, oh no, something else I have to worry about, right? Oh, here's another plan that I'd have to try and, thread this, kind of bizarre needle here.
And that's why, like, when we do our estate planning, every trust has a special needs trust provision in it because
Right.
it solves this problem. If the person inheriting the money is on any government benefits, if that inheritance stays in a special needs trust that is written in the trust, so we call it a third party special needs trust, then we don't all these programs will respect that is maybe a good way to say it.
Right.
And
Yeah, that's actually a great way to say it. And in fact, that was something that was the most kind of comforting about the research I was doing on this topic, is realizing, oh, well, as long as we have our estate planning done beforehand, then this actually allows that protection, right? Like, great, you inherited a house. Well, as soon as that person who's the beneficiary, if they're on Section 8 housing, those funds usually aren't even counted at all, not even counted as an asset, even if it's more than $100,000. And it allows that person to not have to then think, oh no, I received all of this and now I have to move out of my neighborhood. Thanks so much, but now I'm no longer in this circumstance, right? No, estate planning, having a trust in place that allows for this kind of preparation for somebody who maybe is falling on those harder times.
um, people do sometimes what I call shortcut planning, where
Sure.
they just use a will, or they try to put someone as a beneficiary on an account, or they try to put someone as a joint owner on an account,
Yeah, or
or
on a deed.
or on the deed, right? All
Yeah.
that we call shortcut planning. It's quicker and simpler than going into an attorney and asking them to create you an estate plan.
Yeah.
But if any of your beneficiaries are on any government assistance and you do shortcut planning, you have just caused them like a really, really difficult situation. And so that leads me to the question. I haven't looked under this new rule, and I don't know if you saw under the new rule, so I'm putting us both on the spot here, Taylor. If I disclaim my inheritance, am I okay for Section 8 housing?
I'm going to go ahead and say that sounds directly like it would be in violation of the regulation we were just looking over, where it just said that, again, that would likely trigger that 2 year less than fair market value, having kind of gotten rid of whatever those assets were. And I think that a disclaimer would likely put you in a circumstance where, yeah, not only do you not have that asset now, disclaiming, of course, saying, okay, I'm supposed to receive this, but I don't want it now. Well, because you had the ability to receive it, I think that all of a sudden is a transfer for less than fair market value within 2 years, and therefore you wouldn't be able to, you wouldn't be, or it would be counted because it happened within that 2 years.
Yeah, I like so other programs have treated like Medicaid and other programs have treated disclaimed assets as you received it and then you gifted it. Disclaiming
Yeah, there
was
you go. So,
disclaiming was more of a IRS creation, right? Like we're not gonna for inheritance
right.
tax um, and also it's also a state level concept of you don't want the inheritance, okay, you can disclaim it and it can go to someone else. So it's more of a creature of tax law and local state law. And so most of these programs, most of the other programs like Medicaid and SSI and stuff, they have you can't disclaim it. It doesn't make it
Right.
so you're like, oh, I never got it.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you can disclaim,
You
but
can.
it's not as if you didn't receive it. It's as if you said, oh, this gift that would have made me ineligible for this program, I don't want it anymore. Well, now you don't have the gift and you also don't have the program.
Yeah, and I mean I did a kind of search all in the federal regs, and I'm not seeing it specifically address the disclaiming scenario. So
Yeah.
that might be something that we find out in the future when there's a case. Um, but but I don't know if there ever will be a case in this situation because the public housing authorities do have that discretion, and
Yeah.
I could see them accepting a lot of disclaimers as being fine.
Yeah. You think so?
I mean, it it's a pretty wide spectrum, right? Some like really hold people to the rules, so those groups no, but then others are like bend over backwards to try to keep people on the programs.
Yeah.
And those ones I think I could see but even if they will, that sucks for you because that means you literally gave up the money. So if you're
Yeah.
going to have
Yeah.
$150,000 and you disclaim it so you can stay on your subsidized housing, you just said buy at 150,000 and if you're on subsidized housing, you could really use that money in a lot of ways because you
Yeah.
have very little income. And so that is definitely a crappy outcome too. Even if you could
Right.
use it, I probably wouldn't use it.
Right. So I think honestly, end of the day, estate planning, good estate planning, and this is even yet another great example of you need to just put together a trust. If you have, I mean, this one even more so because oftentimes we'll talk to clients and say, hey, if you have, in order to avoid probate, you want to get things in place. If you own a home, more than $100,000 in assets, you have you have more than four vehicles, just to make sure that you're kind of getting away from that wicket. Well, if I have one child and I have $99,000, I might think, oh, well, I don't have to go to probate. Well, if that child all of a sudden is on Section 8 housing and they only have so much and that then pushes them over the asset limit, like that would be a problem, right? So maybe you've avoided probate in one case, but then you've kind of missed it here in Section 8. That's what I like about good planning is it has all of these pieces in place that really follow along with even the newer regulations to ensure that, yeah, we're also taking care of that one too. We're ensuring that you're being provided for and that your beneficiaries, no matter their circumstances, they're being taken care of.
Well, and like that's the interesting thing too is a lot of people look at their specific situation and facts at a moment in time and be like, I don't I'm not worried about Section 8. So if you're listening to this, you're thinking, I don't have any kids that are using subsidized housing.
Oh yeah,
And like the state plan is to cover, we don't know when someone's going to pass away. So this could be 30 years from when you do the planning,
yeah,
5 years from when you do the planning, 10 years. So can you look at 10 years in the future and say, everyone who's going to inherit from me is not using government assistance? And you can't 100% guarantee that.
I know I can't.
It just takes one injury at work or one health issue that springs up, and next thing you know, you're on disability, and the next thing you know, you're using government assistance.
Right.
So, and then where I've seen this happen the most is contingent beneficiaries. So,
Ooh,
like
yeah,
someone predeceased the actual person who had the assets. So they thought it was going to that one child, but that one child died before them, or um, there's some situation where one of their siblings, whoever they're leaving it to, right, someone passed away. So then it trickles down to the second in line, and the
yeah.
second in line is the one who's on government benefits, and the person doing the planning didn't think about them because they didn't think it
Yeah.
would ever go to them.
Well, and especially too, Mike, to that point, like you have to think of the circumstances surrounding having your child that already passed away, and if they have other kids, that usually puts usually a younger family, in a really tight spot where all of a sudden, hey, this is why we have these benefits, right?
Yeah, they
This is why
might
we
need
have a
it.
lot of this is why we have this public assistance, and then so you're essentially by not putting together planning like this, you're saying, hey, I'm going to deprive them of any opportunities that they have of any of these benefits that are actually out there for them. And that I don't think any good client would be willing to say that, right? Just like, nah, they'll figure it out. They don't need those benefits anyway, like that kind of thing. I don't think
That
so.
happens to them, that's their problem, right? No one usually feels that way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They get kicked off their benefits. And that's just the thing. Like there's a list of, 30 reasons why it's good to do your planning right, and this is
Yeah.
just one of the 30. And it's a really big deal when it happens to people.
For sure. And so, I mean, by all means, anyone out there who'd like to come and chat about this, we'd love to talk to you a little bit more. I know this is one of our a little bit more grim subjects. I mean, we are estate planners
We
after all.
talk a lot of our topics are kind of like something
Yeah.
difficult has happened.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure you're listening to this podcast because you're like, you know what? I bet they're going to talk about something fun.
It's going to be really cool to learn about.
Although I don't know, this is actually really pretty cool for me to try and dive into and learn about a little bit.
Yeah,
more.
I think it was a really interesting, fun category to niche down on because you, when you think of estate planning, Section 8 and subsidized housing isn't like, yeah, that applies to estate planning, but it does, big
Yeah,
time.
for sure. Real quick before we leave you all, we want to do a real quick shout out. We know that some people have been reaching out recently, talking to us about, kind of a fear of whether or not somebody can just go in and change their deed or something like that, right? Because deeds, a lot of times, they're public records. We actually did a podcast on this, a while ago. I think we have 100 some odd podcasts now. By all means, if that's one of your questions that you have and you have that question burning right now, feel free to look in our repository of podcasts and you'll be able to find it.
Great point, Taylor. Thanks for highlighting that. And
Sure.
we appreciate everyone who interacts with us with the podcast. And a lot of people just call our firm and reach out to us directly. And we appreciate everybody being willing to engage with us and this great topic of planning for your family and your legacy. And great episode today. Thanks, Taylor.
Hey, yep. Thank you, Mike. And thanks, everybody, for listening.
We'll see you, everybody.
You've been listening to Legacy Lawyers with Michael Haslam and Nathan Croxford. We give you the juicy detail of cases that our law firm has dealt with. We take out the lawyer talk and legalese and show you what options some of our clients had to choose from to fix their situation. The effects of not doing planning can be devastating. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hook up with us on Facebook and Instagram at Voyant Legal. Call us at 801-951-0500 or send us an email at team@voyantlegal.com. And for commonly asked questions, hit voyantlegal.com/resources. We'll see you next time.